Welcome to SewVeryEasy. My name is Laura, and I love using these little SewTite magnets. They're great for any form of sewing, hand sewing, machine sewing, holding our fabrics together, English paper piecing, crafts, hobbies. I've used them quite often. The problem is they are magnetic, so they're a little hard to store. Well, SewTites does have a free pattern that gives us a little folio that we're going to be able to store these magnets. These little SewTite magnets are just that, two little pieces that are magnetized. They can be used for a lot of things, and those magnets are nice and strong. We can use these around computerized machines, but we just can't store them on our computerized machines. So we need to find somewhere to store them. And this is where this little folio is going to come in handy. It does give us an area that we can store our magnets. And it does have an area here where we can store some pins. This is a free pattern. I'll put a link in the description for you. But what we're going to need to go along with this are two pieces of metal. And that way the magnets have something to stick on. So if you have some metal at home, you can use those. If not, you can buy these right from their website so that you can make this. So what we're making is this little folio, and it's going to have that little felt inside. So it's going to be like a little booklet. The felt we will put on after, but we will need two pieces of fabric, a piece of batting, and some flex fuse or a heavy weight interfacing or stabilizer that can stay inside this project. The metal bars will go in between that batting and that stabilizer or that interfacing. So we need something on both sides. These pieces are 5 3/4 by 6.5 inches. So I have my front side facing down with my batting, my inside onto that stabilizer or that Pellon flex fuse, whatever you can use. I'm going to stitch down the center. So this is the length. This is the 6.5 inches. I do want to hold all of those fabrics together, find a center line, and draw. Now we need to hold all of these layers together, and those magnets will work perfect. They can go through really thick fabric. They're easy to use, and they really do hold it secure for me. So my first line of stitching is right down that center, and I am making sure all of those sides are matched up. I'm able to leave those magnets on as I'm stitching, and I can continue drawing lines. We're going to stitch 5 lines. So we have that center line and 2 lines coming down, but we do not want to go any farther than a 2.5 inch mark. So I'm going to take that ruler and do 2.5 inches from this edge, draw a line on that side, turn and do the same. So I'm going to stitch on those 2.5 inch lines, and then I'm going to stitch 1 line right in between. I do want to make sure that I have a 2.5 inch space, so I do not want to stitch into that area because we do want those plates to fit inside. So that gives me 5 lines of stitching, maintaining that 2.5 inches. Once those lines are done, we're going to need to stitch on 3 sides, and we're only going to stitch 1/8 of an inch. So you can just move those magnets over and stitch that 1/8 of an inch. Once those 3 edges have been done, I'm going to insert those metal bars, and I do want them in between that quilt batting and that stabilizer. So we're going to slide those in. Make sure we push them all the way to the bottom and close that seam off with that 1/8 of an inch seam. So that piece of metal is inside, and we can push it to that center, and we still have lots of room to do some stitching. We're going to put some binding on this. We do not need a double fold binding, so we're going to use a single fold binding. A single, we're just using 1 piece, and we're going to stitch this around. So as I'm stitching, I'm going to make sure that that plate is way away from that seam. I like to take my binding and press on a 45-degree angle one little edge over. So we're going to stitch this the same way. We're going to stitch coming to this corner, rotate that fabric, and do it all the way around, just like we would do our normal binding. And as I stitch it, I'm going to make sure that that plate is always out of the way. And this row of stitching, I'm going to do at a 1/4 inch. So I've gone all the way around, and I do have a little tail left over, but you can see where that 45-degree fold is going to give me a nice clean finish. So I'll just cut this excess off, and I'm going to use a 45-degree angle. Now to stitch this over, we're going to take that raw edge, fold it over to that batting edge, and then fold it over one more time, and then we can stitch that down. As for myself, I am going to hand stitch this down all the way. I like the look, and it's less of a chance for me to hit that metal. That single fold binding will keep this thin, but of course you can always use the double fold if you'd like. The next thing we need to do is just do one row of stitching and add that felt on. And of course we can hold that in place while we're stitching. And that little folio is now done. Those 5 rows of stitching will make this close like a spine of a book. If you want, you can give that book spine a little bit of a steam. We can hold it together by having 2 of those SewTites together. Steam that and then let it cool. Once it's cooled down, it's going to stay in that position. Now we're going to be able to move that aside. Just load this up. We can load it up on the one side and the second side. And as an added bonus, we're going to be able to put some pins there if we want. Close this up. Those magnets will keep it closed, so we don't need a closure. When you open it up, just put your thumbs between those 2 pieces of felt, and there they are. This is definitely a really nice way of storing our SewTites. It's compact, and we get to customize it with whatever fabric we'd like. As a matter of fact, before we stitch it together, we could do some embroidery. Thanks for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I do have a newsletter. It's all free under Sew Very Easy. Bye for now.